So what do we do now?
Well, now we're ready to do the dyeing. We take the cloth and we put the cloth into the vat.
Yeah.
And the wool must always be wetted first. This was essential. Otherwise, you wouldn't get a proper take-up of dye, and you'd be putting air into the vat. In the bottom of it, you can see we've got the thing they used to call a trammel.
It's like a chip basket.
It's like a chip basket. The idea is to separate the wool from the sludge at the bottom.
Where's the sludge?
Well, I can show you the sludge at the bottom. Here we are.
Oh, that is gross. That's quite gross.
That's the road.
Yeah.
So anyway, having got the trammel in there, we're now ready. We can put the wool in there,
yeah.
And we need to leave it for about 20 minutes or so in order to pick up the dye. There we are. Right.
John, you're a dyer. How would you have been treated in Tudor times?
Well, it was a very skilled job, but I'm afraid they didn't have any great stand-in.
Queen Elizabeth hated you, didn't she?
Yes, she in fact decreed that the process mustn't be carried out within 5 miles of any royal residence or anywhere where she would be going.
So you were an outcast, really?
Yeah, that's true. Basically, of course, this was applied to many trades, and gentlemen, of course, were not involved in trade. The result is that these jobs would be pushed into the background. And certainly there were lots of complaints about the dyers. They polluted the water, of course. They were throwing the stuff out into the street when they were finished with it. And, of course, it was a noxious smell in any case. Right, here we have the cloth.
I was disappointed to see a greenish blob, but the dye only works when exposed to oxygen.
Right,
oh, Lord. That's extraordinary. It's so quick, isn't it?
It is. It's very effective.
The Elizabethans must have thought this was a miracle.
Well, it was magic, there's no doubt about that. But if you look at a medieval tapestry, you'll see that the dominant colour is always the blue. The yellows have gone, the greens have turned to blue, but the blue will be as good as the day they were done.
This lasting blue was only achieved at the expense of the stained hands of dyers, who also sweated blue. But these human Stiltons were actually pioneers of chemistry. Does the work that chemical dyers do today rest on the kind of things that they were doing in the Middle Ages?
I would say so. There's a tradition right through the Victorian period when they were becoming more and more scientific in their handling of natural dyes. But later on, of course, the pure synthetic dyes came in. But nevertheless, the basic principles are the same even now. And, of course, many of the synthetic dyes are, in fact, copies of the natural dyes. Indigo is an example, of course.
Well, these guys might have been innovators, but I'm sure they didn't have very many friends. I should think you'd only ever been able to marry another dyer or someone with no nose. I've decided to really put myself through the worst jobs of history. So what was the worst job of Tudor times? Wiping Henry VIII's bottom at least got you to the top of the tree. Woe dyeing stank, but you were a pioneer of modern chemistry. And even the gory life of the executioner had a weird kind of celebrity. No, for me, the very worst job was being a wife. Not just any sort of wife, a fishwife. Thanks, Joe. In many ways, a fishwife was the most liberated woman of her era because while her husband was away, she had a job of sorts. Fish? Anyone want a nice piece of fish? Being a fishwife was one of the only jobs specifically for women, and it had a terrible catch-22 about it. To make a living selling fish, you had to be mouthy, make a noise, get noticed. And women doing that were going to get themselves into trouble in Tudor times. Because this was an age of religious clampdown. Men made sure women knew their place by writing job specs for housewives. This is the ideal Tudor woman.
When thou art up and ready, then first sweep the house. Dress up thy dishboard, feed thy calves, strain up thy milk, take up thy children, and provide for thy husband's breakfast, dinner, supper, to bake and brew withal when need is, ducks and geese to lay, and to gather up their eggs, and when they wax broody, to settle them there, as no beasts, swine, or other
So
vermin.
fishwives were on a loser. They had to be loud to do their job, but the Tudors reacted violently to loud women. They punished them as scolds. So I'm going to put myself through those punishments in honour of all the working women who flouted those conventions. The kind of thing a fishwife was likely to be accused of was slandering her neighbours by calling them things like cut-purse, cousin-er, copper-faced whoremonger. What else? boys out of a pantomime, and then they get really arsey with me and cart me off. But the reality was far from pantomime. Breaking the social order was a criminal offence and was met with extreme cruelty even by the standards of the time. People desperately wanted stability. Scolds and fishwives paid the price. Put me down, lads. Thank you, boys of the chorus. What exactly would I have been charged with?
Well, you're a scold, and that means...
Scold?
Yeah, that means more than just being an annoying, disruptive person. You're somebody who has lowered the reputation of your neighbours, a chiding, brawling person who's actually made them look worse by the things that you've said to them in front of their neighbours and in the eyes of the law.
So what's the punishment?
Well, the punishment is this. This is a scold's bridle.
Looks a bit like a chastity belt, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a kind of an iron cage which was used in Tudor times, particularly in northern towns and western towns. And this fits over your head like this. And this bit goes on top of your tongue.
Yeah.
So when that goes on your tongue and you're paraded round in front of your neighbours, not only can you actually physically not speak, but it's a sign to everybody else that you and others like you are to keep your tongue still in the future. This hook goes through here, and then we're done.
What?
So how do you feel now?
Oh, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, that's the general idea, I think. So now, with this rope through there, quite literally lead you by the nose. Yeah, it's supposed to hurt. Your rope. Come on.
What makes it so horrible is that it was the whole community, neighbours you'd have to live with afterwards, who took the punishment into their own hands and let you know what they thought of you. That makes me dizzy all the time.
Okay, I'll take over from here.
God, I see you pouring with dribble.
How do you feel about scolding now?
Oh, God, I tell you, it just makes you so irritable.
Yeah.
These guys are dragging you along, and this thing's jerking on you all the time. They were shoving me all the time. I just wanted to deck them. But this thing here, sorry, it's fairly disgusting now. It's sort of pressing down on your tongue and jamming in. And it depends really on how taut this rope is as to how much pain you're in, actually. Oh, I've just dropped this thing. You can get rid of that for a start. It's so irritating. I can't
Well, this is what got you into trouble in the first place, this attitude.
Well, it doubles it. It doesn't stop it, mate. I want to fight anybody. All of you. Horrible. We don't know how many fishwives were punished. Records only name offenders as wives, the property of men. But we do know that while Elizabeth I was on the throne, these punishments were stepped up in number and severity. For me, the worst was yet to come. We now come to what's got to be the worst part of the worst job in the Tudor period. If the scold's bridle hadn't worked and I was as disruptive as ever, then there was another punishment that they could use, which seems to me to be infinitely worse. We've got half a dozen fierce-looking blokes here and this long metal pole and this pivot in the middle,